Hey everyone, it's Zach with Palantir Research. We finally find out how much Palantir has been paid by Ukraine, and you might be surprised. And looking at the stock briefly first, there doesn't seem to be a response specifically to this news, unsurprisingly. Palantir seems to be continuing its momentum yesterday from an inflation number standpoint, and the Fed's response with a pause and rate cuts in 2024. But as of this recording, this came all the way back down below $18, so we'll see if this actually holds, as we expect to be a point of resistance at least at $18, and we've seen this in the past as well. Now, the big news of the day, Bloomberg released an article covering Palantir and Anduril, but on their woes or struggles in the European market, specifically when it comes to the military government business. Now, quick tip, if you want the free version of the Bloomberg article, just go to the Canadian site, BNN Bloomberg, and they have the exact same articles typically. So you don't need to sign up for a subscription unless you truly want to support Bloomberg, but they put it out here themselves for all to access. Now, the article starts out with setting these hot takes from Karp, basically saying how military budgets are going up because of the Russia-Ukraine war, but still giving contracts to local providers, and he's quoted calling out the terrible investments, but it's not going to change no matter what, how much Karp screams. And Bloomberg also references the French and German struggles for Palantir that Karp brought up too in that earnings call, in regards to them trying to build their own in France, while Germany is restricting them being nationally rolled out. Now, alongside Palantir, they are also talking about Anduril and their founder by ex-Palantir people, but the struggles are the same, where European countries overall just have smaller budgets, and that's expected, honestly, when anyone is compared to the United States, but also their security priorities and concerns about sovereignty, which isn't a money problem here, of course, but a much more difficult one, I'd say, at least personally, for U.S. businesses to go up against since it's ingrained in that. Now, Karp doesn't comment, but essentially Europe prioritizes their domestic solutions, even if they're not truly the best, which can be a fatal mistake. But they allude to Palantir expanding in Asia too when they struggle in Europe. So with the war in Ukraine, Bloomberg paints the picture as if companies expect a cultural shift into more acceptance of tech and U.S. companies in the defense side of their countries. But that hasn't come true. They still prefer local suppliers, incumbents, and pre-existing relationships and ties, regardless of being lower performing. Now, in Ukraine, specifically, Palantir gets a nice summary here of what they've done for them, and that's in regards to the targeting software here, trying to tie data together, but also staff relocating there to help in the war zone, as well as the additional deals of investigating Russian war crimes and the reconstruction, which I'd say, as a lot of Palantir investors are too, believing that to be the actual revenue opportunity. But that's still further down the line here, and we have no idea if that's even going to be big or small. So amongst the United States increasing in spending, there has been more VCs also trying to go after this opportunity here. But when talking numbers, at least right now, it's revealed finally that Palantir has earned around just north of $1 million from the United States Department of Defense for its work with Ukraine and donated the rest of its services. So breaking this down, they specifically note this is paid by the US, not Ukraine. And this is not surprising too, because the actual flow of money from Ukraine and aid really is from the support of the US and NATO countries. So it's not actually from Ukraine paying, which is just receiving the donated services. Now, this isn't new news as well, and we knew this going in as investors with Alex Karp's comments. Now, the extent of how long this will go on, we don't know, and what the actual opportunity is in the end. And they also pointed out, though, from at least Ukraine themselves, there were so many other pitches from companies that were denied because they came in as research and development projects here. And that's understandably so, too, and I would agree with that. No one wants to be the testing guinea pig when your own country is fighting for your life and sovereignty and is just being seen as a money bag for these companies. That's the thing that Palantir did well, at least, and probably is one of the only few companies in the world that could pull this off, getting into Ukraine this way because they are outward and openly in support of the West, and you can't fake that with donating your services here and shouting from the rooftops what you say about other companies, not going to the side of Ukraine. Now, if it's for R&D purposes, they of course are developing their product alongside the country here. Now, it doesn't sound like they're trying to export it out here, but rather they're building it up so that the Ukraine military can use it for themselves, at least into the future. Now, the main problem still, though, is what Karp says. Europe is still trying to get away from American tech and Pentagon priorities. And we can't say Palantir is following exactly what the Pentagon wants, but it's obvious they'll provide the tech they need here. So this puts European nations' guard up. And they bring up the issue in France with them trying to build their own Gotham for £40 million, while Karp rebukes them, of course, and saying they can't even build it for $1 billion. So Gotham was developed alongside the United States government during the early days and took decades to refine over time, and has been the counterterrorism software in Europe during the 2010s. But so be it, I guess. They can try, and hopefully this doesn't end up being fatal for the French people. I would never wish that upon anyone here, even though it might come down just to money. But the one shining light, at least for Palantir, is their work with the UK. But they gotta also splash their water on here from Bloomberg saying it's still modest revenue. And I'd have to say the relationship-wise, they're the strongest in Europe militarily, but it still isn't a huge dollar amount here for Palantir. Now, as they've gotten more ingrained with the UK, we just have to see if they get bigger contracts over time. But it's the same issue, at least publicly, that Palantir has to struggle with their reputation. And we saw this all because of the NHS contract here and maybe Twitter. So Palantir can only keep doing the same thing, saying that they actually do as those decisions for them or selling it of any kind. But no matter what they say, this misinformation of them selling data and spying continues to permeate throughout the media there. But they close out also looking east, and no new information here, unfortunately, for Palantir. We last heard about any East Asian priorities was when we were in the interview with the global tech lead for Fujitsu and Fox Business. They asked about Japan's military, nothing concrete here from Karp, but admiration, and obviously the motivation factors are there for them to help out. But Bloomberg refers to their earnings call in regards to Taiwan and Chinese aggression would absolutely aid our partners in Asia. So we'll just have to wait for more information to eventually come out. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's more on the United States Navy side here trying to help them out, because having a direct tie to Taiwan would definitely draw the attention of the CCP out in China. Now, my thoughts on all of this is a good article, honestly, for a newer investor to catch up on what's happening in Palantir's European military business. I've obviously created videos as they go along here as new news comes out on individual matters, and this is regards to Ukraine, France, Germany, and that were pointed out specifically in this article. But the newest bit of information is only that $1 million paid for their services in Ukraine by the United States DoD. And this is currently the status quo and trend in Europe with these struggles. I've got no indication of this reversing, at least in the Central Europe, but Eastern Europe still continues to be an opportunity, I'd say, for expansion because of Russian aggression, which prompted the Baltic nations to prioritize their defense. I treat this similarly to the United States government contracts of being lumpy. Although there are not contracts really to look forward to in Europe, but as a geopolitical environment remaining uncertain, I'd at least want to hope any US-driven spending because of what is happening in Europe can still be a possibility for Palantir in modernizing their defense. So you can think of it as an indirect way of getting European revenue, albeit it's actually from our taxpayer expense for the United States. But I think as a steward of US defense money, Palantir at least is a company we can rely on to follow US interests, which can be a hot take, especially if you believe at shareholder profits at all costs. But that's already been cut anyways with Palantir's statements in never helping U.S. adversaries. And there's also the trickle effect, too, of other services from these conflicts, like helping relocate refugees, and those can't be counted out there, especially if we deal with the supply chain aspect of things. Now, if this translates commercially to struggles, we'll have to see. Now, I'm not saying this will be a bright spot either, but at least there's still a possibility for adoption, as we've seen with the latest UniCredit deal being extended. But this also isn't surprising since management's comments have been that the United States is the bright spot for the business. So we've been prompted at this point to not be surprised at an article like this, but for the business, we'll hope this trend reverses, but that means there's no room for error in the US side of things, which has had the positive comments all around from management in regards to AIP boot camps and the numbers around that. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.